They say we live on a sphere, spinning silently through the void, a blue marble adrift in an endless sea of stars. It's a truth so deeply ingrained that to question it seems absurd. We learn it in childhood, see it in textbooks, accept it in the way we accept the rising of the sun or the pull of gravity. But what if that truth was never ours to discover? What if the very shape of the world, the most fundamental fact about our existence, was carefully rewritten, folded over itself, and hidden in plain sight? Throughout history, geometry has carried a secret power. Shapes are not just aesthetic, they are structure, blueprint, code. And of all the forms in nature, none is more stable, more ordered, more absolute than the cube. 6 equal faces, 8 perfect vertices, boundaries, balance, symmetry. Long before the modern world, the ancients spoke of the 4 corners of the earth, not as metaphor, but as reality. Sacred structures mirrored the cube, temples aligned to invisible edges, myths of bounded realms echoing through time. And yet today, no one speaks of a cubed earth. It's not merely dismissed, it's erased, overshadowed by the endless debate between spheres and planes, a conflict that serves perhaps to obscure something stranger, something far more structured and far more forbidden. Why is the idea of a cube Earth absent from our conversations? Why are the oldest references to cubes tied to the sacred, the ritualistic, the mysterious, yet never applied to the world itself? Why does the black cube appear over and over, across religions, nations, and secret societies? The suppression of an idea often says more than its acceptance, and tonight, we'll walk softly through the edges of reality, peeling back the smooth veneer of modern understanding to reveal an older, angular world hiding underneath. A world bounded by 6 great faces, stitched together at the seams, moving through the dark, not as a sphere, but as a cube. Welcome to the forbidden geometry. Welcome to the hidden truth of the cube Earth. Long before telescopes pointed skyward and cartographers charted coastlines, there were the stories, whispers passed down from civilizations that left behind stones, symbols, and secrets. Buried in the ruins of ancient cities and scratched into the dust of forgotten temples, we find a geometry strangely persistent, the cube, not merely as art, not merely as abstraction, but as something sacred, something remembered. In the arid lands of Mesopotamia, the birthplace of writing, of cities, of empires, the black stone of Elam was said to be a sacred relic, a cube of dark material venerated by kings and priests alike. In Sumerian myth, the universe itself was ordered into 4 corners, divided not along a curve, but across clean, deliberate edges. The ancient Egyptians spoke of Ma'at, cosmic order, aligning all things through balance and straightness. Their temples, with perfect right angles and heavy square structures, seem almost out of place in a world supposedly carved by chaos. As if they knew, as if they were preserving something deeper than architecture, a cosmic memory. Further east in the Indus Valley, cube-shaped weights form the foundation of trade and science. To weigh the world, they chose the cube. In the Americas, the Maya built pyramids that, from certain perspectives, emphasized edges and planes, cubes softened only by erosion and time. The Hopi spoke of the world being built from sacred directions, their cosmology defined by exactness, by boundaries. Across religions, the cube appears again and again. The Kaaba in Mecca, the holiest site in Islam, is a near-perfect cube, covered in black cloth, said to have existed before the flood, before Abraham, before memory itself. In Judaism, the tefillin, small cubic boxes containing sacred texts, are worn during prayer to bind the mind and the heart to the divine. In Christianity's final revelation, the New Jerusalem descends from the heavens, not as a sphere, not as a mountain, but as a city shaped like a perfect cube, with equal length, width, and height. And yet, no one asks the question, why the cube? Why across continents, across oceans, across the veil of time itself? Could it be that the ancients were not simply honoring the cube, but remembering it? Remembering the shape of the world as it once was known, as it once was seen? Before modern science wrapped the world in a sphere, before cartographers smoothed its sharpness into curves, perhaps the Earth stood revealed, a six-faced monolith, bounded by edges lost to modern perception, but preserved in the stories that refuse to die. In the forgotten cubes of our ancestors, we glimpse a shattered reflection of a greater truth, one we are only now beginning to see again. For centuries, ancient cultures spoke not of a round world, but of a world divided by lines, angles, and corners. The four corners of the earth, a phrase repeated across civilizations, was never merely a poetic device. It was a memory, a distant echo of a time when the structure of the world was understood differently, when it was sharper, clearer, more defined. In Mesopotamia, the universe was mapped into four zones: north, south, east, and west, each corresponding to distinct powers and deities. The ancient Egyptians built temples facing exact cardinal directions, anchoring their cities not to the sky, but to a terrestrial framework of perfect right angles. The Mayans and Aztecs constructed sacred plazas bounded by four ceremonial gateways, each aligned to cosmic axes. Everywhere, the number four dominated. 4 seasons, 4 winds, 4 rivers flowing from a sacred center outward toward the edges of the world. But why corners? Why directions so rigid, so absolute, in a world supposedly curved and soft? Cartographers of the medieval era inherited distorted maps where the world was divided into quadrants, not circles. Ancient globes, when examined closely, often reveal cube-like artifacts hidden within their designs, longitudinal and latitudinal lines forced into right-angled grids that seem strangely out of place on a sphere. Even the mythologies of remote tribes, isolated by oceans and centuries, contain strikingly similar imagery. Square lands floating in cosmic seas, flat faces joined at edges invisible to human eyes, boundaries at the farthest reaches where reality itself becomes angular. The Greeks spoke of Oceanus, a vast river that circled the known world, but they never agreed whether its flow was continuous or marked by sudden edges, sharp shifts at the world's limits. Plato described Atlantis as arranged in concentric rings, but hints at divisions, hard separations between zones, not soft, flowing curves. Today, the phrase, "the four corners of the earth," survives, but its meaning has been diluted, dismissed as metaphor. Yet in the oldest traditions, it was anything but symbolic. It was the architecture of existence itself. Perhaps the ancients saw the world as it truly was, not a boundless sphere, but a finite, angular plane, stitched together at 4 great seams, 4 corners, where the very fabric of space and gravity folded against itself. And if these corners still exist, hidden in forgotten lands beyond our reach, then perhaps, just perhaps, the world we know is but one face of a much larger, much older design. Mathematics is often called the language of the universe, pure, impartial, eternal. But mathematics is also selective. It privileges certain forms, certain patterns, above others, and among all possible shapes, none holds a more profound, silent authority than the cube. The cube is the simplest 3-dimensional solid, 6 equal faces, 12 equal edges, 8 perfect vertices. It is stability incarnate, a shape that resists distortion, that holds its form against time and entropy. Ancient mathematicians revered the cube not just for its symmetry, but for its sacredness. The Greeks called it the hexahedron, one of the 5 Platonic solids, figures believed to represent the fundamental elements of reality itself. While the sphere was seen as ideal for the heavens, the cube was reserved for the earth, the domain of matter, structure, and endurance. In hidden schools of thought, long before modern physics, it was believed that reality itself crystallized around cubic frameworks, invisible scaffolds, cubic matrices upon which matter formed, grew, and stabilized. Even today, when we peer into the microstructures of nature, the cube persists. Salt crystals grow in perfect cubes. Certain metals, cooled slowly, arrange themselves in cubic lattices. At the smallest scales of reality, it seems the cube is not an invention, but a memory, coded into the very bones of the universe. Ancient number systems reinforce this forgotten truth. The cube's 6 faces and 8 corners align with sacred numbers, revered across continents. 6. The number of creation and harmony. 8. The number of cosmic balance and resurrection. The ley lines that crisscross the earth, ancient energy grids connecting sacred sites, reveal angular, patterned layouts when mapped on global projections. They fit awkwardly on a sphere, but elegantly, naturally, on a cube. It is almost as if the planet's own subtle forces are whispering a shape we've forgotten, a structure hidden behind the clouds, behind the oceans, behind the very curvature we are taught never to question. Sacred geometry, long dismissed as mysticism, encoded something more. Not superstition, but memory. Memory of a world built on right angles, cosmic corners, and a grand design shaped by the cold, elegant mathematics of the cube. And if the Earth itself was once known to fit this sacred order, then the spherical model we are given today is not a discovery, but a deviation. A deviation from the true architecture of reality. When we look up at the stars, at the blue curve of the sky, at the shimmering images of Earth from space, we assume we are seeing reality. We trust the images. We trust the institutions. We trust that what is shown is what is. But trust is a fragile thing, and perception, even more so. Since its founding, NASA has held near absolute control over the public's image of Earth. Every photograph, every live feed, every planetary map, the agency that took humanity beyond the veil of the atmosphere, also became the sole gatekeeper of how our world looks from afar. Yet very few realize that these iconic Earth images are not direct snapshots. They are composites, layered mosaics, stitched together from fragments of data and colored with artistic interpretation. The famous blue marble image, said to be the first full picture of Earth from space, is not a single photograph. It is an assembled tapestry, a carefully crafted vision. Even today, satellites orbit the Earth in segmented passes, collecting slices of information. These slices are then mathematically blended, corrected, and filled in where data is missing, often through computer modeling, not direct observation. Is it possible, then, that subtle truths could be adjusted? That the shape of continents, the curvature of horizons, the subtle tilt of clouds could be massaged, not with sinister intent, but under the assumption of a model already accepted as fact? If the Earth were cubic, its faces vast and slightly curved by gravitational lensing, a photographer orbiting at conventional heights might never notice. Software algorithms designed to model a sphere would iron out edges, blending seams, smoothing corners that might otherwise hint at a hidden structure. The very technology we trust to reveal the truth may be the machinery that edits it. Beyond NASA, private corporations have followed the same protocols. Satellite imaging companies, GPS networks, weather stations, all use spherical Earth assumptions in their data processing cores. If the original model was flawed or incomplete, every system that relies on it only compounds the illusion. In this way, truth becomes not just hidden, but systematically overwritten, invisible not because of active deceit, but because of the mechanical nature of belief. Input the model, output the expected world. It is a cycle so perfect, so airtight, that few ever stop to question it. And in the spaces between those perfect, composited images, between the satellite passes, the software corrections, the stitched clouds, and the adjusted coastlines, the edges of another world might still flicker. A world not round, not flat, but cubic, a hidden architecture waiting to be seen, if only we knew where to look. We are told that the horizon curves, that if we stand on the shore or climb a mountain, we should see the Earth's roundness reveal itself. That distance itself is proof. But when we look, really look, what we find is something far stranger. Across oceans, across plains, across deserts and ice fields, the horizon remains unnervingly straight. From high altitudes, from balloons and aircraft, the line persists. Not bowing, not arcing, but stretching flat and sharp in every direction. Sometimes bending subtly upward, sometimes remaining eerily level, even at heights where a curve should be undeniable. It is a paradox few speak of, but many have noticed. Pilots have reported that no matter how far they fly, no matter how high they ascend, they must always tilt downward to maintain altitude. Yet the horizon, the supposed visible boundary of a sphere, rises to meet their eyes instead of falling away. A contradiction hidden in plain sight. If the Earth were a perfect sphere, the drop-off should be measurable, visible, accelerating with distance. But what if the Earth were something else? Something shaped with faces, with edges, with transitions smoothed only by atmosphere and perception. In a cube Earth model, the faces themselves would be vast and largely flat. The meeting lines, the edges, would be distant and blurred, masked by light scattering, perspective compression, and the natural haze of the lower atmosphere. From human height, and even from high flight, we would be standing on one face of the cube, perceiving a vast, endless flatness bordered by fog and illusion. The slight curvature sometimes photographed from high-altitude planes and weather balloons. Not Earth's roundness, but optical distortion. The effect of wide-angle lenses, cabin windows, and even the elastic nature of human vision itself. And the horizon's persistent sharpness, its stubborn refusal to curve away dramatically, may be the truest hint of all. The ancient builders of pyramids, ziggurats, and megalithic monuments knew something we forgot. They built not for spheres, but for plains. Their sight lines stretched perfectly across deserts, align precisely to stars, anticipate angles and edges as though the world beneath them were a bound, flat face, not a curve. And in the modern age, when engineers plan colossal bridges, massive railroads, and continent-spanning pipelines, the curvature of the Earth is rarely, if ever, accounted for at the scales we would expect. Structures are laid flat, straight, direct, following a plane so vast that even the faintest of curves remain theoretical, not visible. The horizon does not lie. It stretches before us, a silent witness to a forgotten architecture, a face of a cube, ancient and immense, hiding just beneath the illusions of distance and expectation. Gravity is something we rarely question, an invisible force, pulling all things downward, universally consistent, or so we are taught. But anomalies exist, strange places where gravity behaves in ways that seem to defy the textbooks, objects rolling uphill, compasses spinning aimlessly, measurable gravitational variations at certain latitudes and altitudes. Mainstream science attributes these to optical illusions, magnetic irregularities, or local mass concentrations. But what if the real answer is far stranger? What if these anomalies hint at a deeper, structural truth about the Earth itself? In a cube Earth model, gravity would behave differently across the vast faces and sharp edges. At the center of each face, gravity would pull directly downward, stable, consistent, familiar. But as one moved toward the edges and corners, gravitational vectors would subtly tilt, angling inward toward the adjoining faces. At the extreme edges, near the corners of the cube, gravity could become warped, pulling sideways, curving unexpectedly, causing objects to behave oddly, compasses to spin unpredictably, and localized weight variations to occur. A distortion not strong enough to shatter perception, but enough to create persistent mysteries at the margins. Antarctica and the Arctic, the so-called poles, have long been sites of gravitational oddities. Satellites lose signal. Magnetic north drifts. Strange atmospheric phenomena dance in the skies. And deep beneath the ice, secretive military expeditions dig without explanation. Could it be that these regions are not poles at all, but seams, places where the faces of the Earth meet and fold, where gravity warps and reveals the hidden architecture beneath our feet? Further anomalies emerge when we examine Earth's magnetic field. It wobbles, it flips at irregular intervals, it forms geometric patterns far too organized for a purely spherical body. The ancient legends tell of gates at the corners of the world, places where the laws of reality themselves seem thin, strange, permeable. These myths, dismissed as metaphor, may instead describe the gravitational distortions found where the faces of the cube converge. The physics of a cube. Earth would not cancel gravity, but it would bend it, focus it, fold it along seams invisible to the casual observer, but undeniable to those who know where and how to look. The Earth's hidden geometry is not smooth, endless, and uniform. It is angular, structured, deliberate. A grand machine with forces we barely comprehend, whispering of edges just beyond our sight, waiting to be rediscovered. For centuries, the polar regions have been shrouded in mystery, not simply because of their brutal cold or endless nights, but because they guard something deeper, something hidden at the edges of our maps and the fringes of our understanding. Antarctica and the Arctic, often called the poles, are more than just barren wastelands. They are boundaries, seams where the faces of the Earth might meet, corners where the invisible architecture of the cube reveals itself in whispers, in distortions, in anomalies that no textbook can fully explain. Consider the strangeness of Antarctica, a continent wrapped in secrecy, protected by the Antarctic Treaty, where nations that otherwise clash unite to preserve an untouchable no-man's land. Satellite imagery scrubbed, travel restricted, research stations carefully positioned, but movement beyond tightly controlled. What could warrant such intense global coordination? What if the reason lies not in politics or penguins, but in the geometry of the world itself? What if the southernmost expanse is not a vast cap atop a sphere, but the meeting place of edges, the corner of a colossal cube? Historical accounts hint at it. Explorers who spoke of walls of ice rising suddenly, sharply, tales of strange magnetic disturbances, compasses spinning as though reality itself were folding, myths of gateways, entrances to other worlds, positioned at the edges of existence. Operation High Jump, the massive U.S. military expedition to Antarctica in 1946, officially cited training and research purposes. But unofficially, rumors swirl of encounters with impenetrable ice walls, strange energies, and phenomena never made public. At the other end of the world, the Arctic tells its own quiet story. Ancient legends from northern cultures speak of sacred places at the pole, places guarded by spirits, hidden behind veils of mist and endless night, places where the world thins, and beyond which no man was meant to tread. And the maps of old, those antique charts filled with dragons and phantom islands, often placed vast, unmapped lands near the poles, not by accident, but perhaps by fragmented memory. A memory of a world bounded, edged, and folded. In a cube Earth model, these polar regions would be the seams, zones where gravitational forces shift, where the sky warps subtly, bending light and magnetism, where access is not just discouraged, but forbidden, because the architecture of reality itself would become undeniable. Perhaps this is why we are taught to imagine the poles as barren, empty, hostile, to keep us away, to keep us dreaming of curves, not corners. For at these polar gates, if one were to venture far enough, to see with unclouded eyes, one might find an edge. A horizon not of endless curvature, but of joining planes. A boundary where the old world ends, and the forgotten geometry of the Earth begins. If the Earth is not a sphere, not a disk, but a cube, then everything we know about maps is wrong. Not just slightly wrong, foundationally, geometrically wrong. The maps we use today, Mercator projections, globe models, satellite images, are stitched, stretched, and distorted to fit a predetermined sphere. But hidden in these distortions are clues, subtle fractures in the illusion. When ancient maps are examined closely, strange patterns emerge. Continents shaped with unnatural sharpness, island chains lining up along suspiciously straight axes, oceanic features bent into lines and corners, not gentle arcs. Consider the old tales of missing lands, Terra Australis, High Brazil, the phantom islands of the early explorers. Their appearances and disappearances are not the products of whimsy. They could be echoes of lands once visible at the seams and corners of the cube, distorted or erased when the model was forcibly curved. Imagine a world redrawn. 6 vast faces, each its own massive plane. Oceans spanning square expanses. Continents distributed with greater symmetry, centered along faces, stretching toward edges where distortions begin. Gravity tilting gently at the margins, creating transitional regions where maps warp, the very regions sailors once feared to chart. In such a model, the so-called mysteries of Earth's geography, the perfect alignment of ancient megalithic sites along improbable great circles, the way certain ocean currents flow along almost straight-line patterns, the magnetic anomalies clustered along geometric lattices, all begin to make sense. Satellite telemetry data, often dismissed or explained away, reveals faint geometric harmonics in Earth's magnetic field. Flight paths, when analyzed over long distances, show peculiar kinks and shifts that a globe fails to predict smoothly, but a cube could explain. The hidden seams of the cube could account for the great trenches, the mid-Atlantic ridge, the sudden and unnatural depth drops across ocean floors, boundaries where planes meet, fold, and interact, where Earth's structural underpinnings subtly emerge. And the maps we have today? Not deliberate lies, but artifacts of forced translation. The act of flattening cube faces onto a spherical shell introduces the distortions, the oddities, the secrets we have learned to ignore. Perhaps this is why ancient navigators relied on the stars more than the Earth itself, because the map below their feet was more complicated, more angular, more alive than modern models dare admit. In mapping the cube, we are not inventing a new world. We are rediscovering an older one. A world that still speaks through the fault lines, the shifting seas, the restless sky. If only we remember how to listen. In the hidden architecture of our world, shapes carry meaning, and among all the symbols that quietly persist in our society, none is more potent or more carefully overlooked than the cube. The black cube appears in places both sacred and profane. In Mecca, the Kaaba, a perfect cube draped in black, forms the spiritual heart of Islam. In Judaism, the tefillin, small cubic boxes bound to the body during prayer, carry sacred texts close to the mind and heart. In Christianity, the heavenly New Jerusalem is described as a perfect cube descending from the sky. But the cube's presence does not end in places of worship. It infiltrates the world of commerce, government, and secret societies. The headquarters of major corporations are often vast, stark cubes of glass and steel. Financial districts around the world feature ominous black cube sculptures, silent sentinels surrounded by hurried, distracted crowds. Modern art installations prominently display minimalistic cubes, hollowed out, mirrored, deconstructed, and yet always unmistakably present. The cube is everywhere, hiding in plain sight, in architecture, in logos, in the unconscious language of power. Why? Perhaps because those who shape culture and perception remember something we have forgotten, that the cube is not merely a symbol, it is a key to the true structure of the world beneath our feet. The cube represents boundaries, the limitation of movement, the division of space into orderly, measurable forms. It suggests stability, containment, and control. concepts crucial to maintaining an illusion of order in a world built on hidden chaos. But beyond the metaphorical, the cube may be a subtle nod to the Earth's hidden geometry, a signal, a silent acknowledgement that at the deepest level, reality itself conforms not to a sphere or a boundless plane, but to an ancient, angular blueprint. In occult traditions, the cube represents the material world, the heavy, physical plane through which spirit must labor to ascend. Freemasonry, Hermeticism, and other secret traditions encode the cube as a step, a challenge, an obstacle between ignorance and enlightenment. The Rubik's Cube, the world's most famous puzzle, is not simply a toy. It is a miniature model of frustration and solution, an emblem of hidden order waiting to be restored. Solve the cube and unlock the pattern. Fail and remain trapped in a world of seeming chaos. Even in popular culture, the cube recurs as portals to other dimensions, as artifacts of immense power, as enigmatic keys that challenge characters and audiences to see beyond their assumptions. It is no accident. It is not coincidence. It is memory. The faint recollection of a world where the cube was not just symbol, but structure. A memory encoded in stone, in steel, in tradition and design, waiting silently for those who have eyes to see and minds to remember. If the Earth were truly a sphere, we would expect the heavens to behave with perfect curvature, a seamless dome above a spinning globe. But again, the ancient traditions tell a different story, one of angles, of edges, of cosmic structure hidden in plain sight. Across cultures, the sky was not described merely as a curve, but as a framework. The Egyptians spoke of the goddess Nut arching over the earth, her body forming a rigid canopy divided by stars. The Mesopotamians imagined the heavens not as a boundless expanse, but as a ceiling segmented into zones, regulated by strict patterns. The Norse spoke of Yggdrasil, a great world structure connecting defined realms stacked and ordered, not freely floating. And in the final visions of Christian scripture, when the New Jerusalem descends from the sky, it comes not as a cloud, not as a sphere, but as a perfect cube, a city of astonishing dimensions, equal in width, length, and height, bound by clear edges and colossal walls, a geometry meant to mirror something profound about reality itself. Why a cube? Why in the stars? Modern astronomy often presents us with perfect orbits, endless spinning, yet the deeper we look, the more anomalies appear. Galaxies aligning in strange grid-like patterns, cosmic filaments stretching across space, forming vast angular structures, dark matter maps that reveal unexpected symmetries. The ancient concept of the firmament, often ridiculed today, may in fact represent a memory of cosmic boundaries, invisible planes or layers separating realms, folding and stretching across an earth not endlessly curved, but composed of angular faces. Even our measurements of the cosmos reveal geometric peculiarities, light bending at sharp thresholds, the cosmic microwave background showing faint quadrupole alignments, echoes, perhaps, of a grander cubic design imprinted on the universe itself. If Earth once stood openly as a cube, the sky above it would not have been a boundless dome, but a structured field, grids of stars, edges of influence, zones of hidden transition. Ancient navigators, following the stars, relied not merely on position, but on alignment. Angular relations between fixed points, repeating not chaotically, but with deliberate regularity. Today, we are taught to see randomness, to expect infinite expansion without form. But if the ancients were right, then the heavens above and the earth below once mirrored each other in ways we have long since forgotten. Cube above, cube below. A symmetry encoded in the oldest myths, the oldest temples, the oldest stars, waiting, still, for us to remember. We often think of time and space as flowing smoothly, endlessly. But what if they, too, are shaped by the forgotten architecture of the cube, Long before modern physics dissected space-time into equations, ancient mystics hinted at something stranger: that reality itself is divided, segmented, structured along invisible lines. That time does not flow like a river, but turns, folds, and pivots at corners we can barely perceive. In the 20th century, isolated theorists proposed radical ideas, like the forbidden time cube theory, suggesting that 4 simultaneous days occur in a single rotation of Earth, layered and segmented by an unseen cubic rhythm. Mainstream science dismissed it as madness. Yet the idea touched something primal, a sense that reality itself might not be smooth, but tessellated, a grand lattice of time and motion shifting across hidden seams. If Earth is a cube, then gravity, light, and even time would behave differently across its faces. Time might flow faster at the center of a face, slowing subtly near the edges. Magnetic fields would pulse and fold along angular seams. Gravitational currents could bend not just mass, but also memory, trapping echoes of events along the cube's vast edges. The ancient stories whisper of sacred times, moments when the barriers thin, when the faces of the world realign. Eclipses, solstices, planetary alignments, not random, but points where the cubic framework subtly reveals itself. Moments when time itself bends. Even modern physics, quietly, has begun to find hints. Quantum entanglement suggests non-local, structured relationships. Simulations of space-time hint at emergent geometries, cubic lattices forming the scaffolding of existence. The behavior of particles, when pushed to extremes, collapses not into chaos, but into strangely ordered, grid-like patterns. We are taught to think of space as infinite, time as a straight arrow. But what if reality is more like a colossal Rubik's cube, with layers shifting, faces rotating, alignments hidden from surface perception? Our myths remember. Our architecture remembers. Our dreams remember. Perhaps déjà vu, synchronicity. The eerie feeling of fated moments are not coincidences, but artifacts of movement across an unseen cubic time grid. And if the Earth itself is built on that structure, then we, living upon its faces, are passengers not on a spinning ball, but on a rotating, breathing cube of space, time, and consciousness, moving through a cosmic framework far stranger than we dare imagine. The cube is not just the shape of Earth, it is the shape of reality itself. Not all truths stay buried forever. Sometimes cracks form in the walls of silence, and when they do, a few voices slip through, voices bearing fragments of forbidden knowledge. Over the past decades, scattered reports have surfaced from military insiders, rogue scientists, and shadowed explorers. Most are drowned in noise, dismissed as conspiracy or delusion. But among the static, patterns emerge. Patterns that point again and again to a different Earth, a structured Earth, an Earth shaped not by curves, but by edges. Satellite engineers speak anonymously of anomalous returns, data glitches that form perfect right angles over certain regions. Pilots whisper of dead zones in the sky, where compass needles spin and GPS signals fracture. Deep-sea explorers report undersea ridges and trenches that stretch in perfect, unnatural lines, defying plate tectonics as we understand it. And then there are the leaks. Obscure, hard-to-find fragments of telemetry. Old mission footage showing sudden angular distortions at the edges of the frame. Maps retrieved from forgotten archives that depict land masses curving and bending in ways no sphere should allow. Diagrams of energy fields forming faint cube-like grids around the planet, buried deep in military research. Many of these leaks are immediately debunked. Some are quietly erased. Others are mocked so loudly and bizarrely that public attention drifts elsewhere, the classic method of truth laundering, hiding the genuine inside the absurd. And then there are the insiders who go silent, researchers who vanish, careers destroyed over seemingly minor disagreements with official models, whistleblowers discredited by a sudden barrage of scandals, erasing their credibility before they can speak clearly. If there is nothing to hide, Why silence them? Why ridicule so aggressively? Because a cube Earth is not just a challenge to science, it is a challenge to perception itself, to governments, to power structures built on control of the narrative. Imagine the consequences if the truth emerged. That our world is not a sphere suspended in infinite space, but a grand ancient machine, angular and vast. That gravity, time, and energy operate differently at its hidden seams. That entire regions are concealed, misunderstood, or off-limits to protect the secret. It would not simply rewrite textbooks. It would shatter the controlled illusion of an infinite, formless cosmos, replacing it with something designed, structured, enclosed. A cube. Ancient. Deliberate. Waiting. Waiting for the moment when enough pieces slip through the cracks and the forgotten geometry of our world can no longer be denied. The most powerful prisons are the ones we cannot see. The strongest lies are not the ones forced upon us, but the ones we choose to believe. If the Earth is a cube, why keep it secret? Why go to such lengths to erase the edges, smooth the faces, and teach generations to imagine only spheres and curves? Because geometry shapes more than space. It shapes perception. It shapes minds. The round Earth model is more than science. It is a psychological operating system, a way of framing existence itself as limitless, boundaryless, endlessly expanding into chaos. It instills a subconscious belief that humanity is adrift, insignificant, a tiny speck on a random spinning ball in infinite void. But a cube Earth, a structured Earth, tells a different story. It speaks of order, of boundaries, of a designed reality, shaped, measured, intentional. A cube suggests containment. It implies limits to exploration, edges beyond which lies mystery, not infinity. It hints at a grand design, an architecture so ancient, so profound, that the illusion of endlessness had to be created to mask it. And so, systems were built to reinforce the spherical illusion. Education, shaping the minds of children from the earliest age, embedding the spinning globe into every map, every textbook, every model. Entertainment, films, cartoons, even logos, always subtly reinforcing the sphere, the curve, the endlessness. Science, gatekeeping data, ridiculing dissent, branding any deviation as lunacy. Psychology, teaching that to question obvious truths is to be a fool, a conspiracy theorist, a madman. The goal is not just to hide the shape of the Earth, but to control the very framework through which humanity perceives reality, to train minds to reject structure, to forget order, to embrace chaos as natural and structure as illusion. For in forgetting the cube, we forget ourselves. We forget the ancient knowledge passed down through myths and monuments, encoded into the temples aligned to invisible grids, whispered in the legends of four corners and sacred directions. We forget that the world once had boundaries, not prison walls, but sacred walls, meant to protect, to frame, to reveal. And in that forgetting, we become adrift, vulnerable, malleable, controlled. To reclaim the truth of the cube is not merely to redraw a map, it is to reclaim perception itself, to awaken from the dream of endless spinning, and remember that we live within a world of meaning, structure, and hidden purpose. A world that was not given to us randomly, but built for us, with edges we were never meant to forget. The cube was never lost. It was hidden, buried beneath layers of belief, distraction, and engineered forgetting. But now, the edges begin to show. The cracks widen. The hidden geometry calls to those willing to look beyond the surface, and to remember. To awaken to the cube Earth is not merely to swap one model for another. It is to reframe reality itself. To see that boundaries are not prisons, but frameworks for growth, for meaning, for truth. It is to recognize that ancient monuments were not random marvels, but signposts, reminders of an older world shaped by sacred geometry, built in harmony with cosmic structures long ignored. It is to understand that the stars themselves still trace invisible edges overhead, that the ley lines beneath our feet hum faintly with the memory of perfect planes, that the forgotten corners of the earth, the frozen gates at the poles, the magnetic seams of the oceans, still whisper to us, if only we listen. Awakening is not easy. It demands courage. It demands the willingness to confront ridicule, to walk against the tide of engineered consensus. It demands the strength to see through the comfort of infinite curves to the harder, stranger, and deeper truth, that we live in a world designed, structured, and intentional. A cube. Earth changes everything. It suggests a cosmos not born of randomness, but of architecture. A universe built upon foundations older than time, shaped by intelligence we barely comprehend. It hints that humanity itself is not an accident, but an intended presence, positioned upon one vast, ancient face of a living, breathing cube, moving through the great corridors of space and time. And so, the choice stands before us. Continue dreaming in endless spinning circles, or awaken, step across the threshold, and see the hidden edges of the world once more. The cube waits, silent, patient, timeless. It has always been there, beneath our feet, above our heads, etched into our myths, our monuments, our dreams, waiting for us to remember, waiting for us to see.